In the last lecture module, we talked about how arguments lead this double life, and I gave you this picture of the blacklight tattoo to illustrate the two components of a successful argument. Successful arguments have good content. They have true premises, but they also have good logical form. They have an underlying structural relationship that translates the truth of the premises into either the truth of the conclusion or the high probability of the conclusion. And I use the picture of that tattoo under the black light to illustrate that second life that arguments lead. And I said that human beings, our inferences, our decision making are highly contextualized. That is, content, what the argument is about, the truth of the premises, and context, the way the argument is presented, the situation, and so on. Those are things that human beings are very sensitive to that drive our inferences and our decision making. However, human beings, I said, are relatively insensitive to those underlying structural relationships, the logical form of the argument. And so we're good when we can rely on content and context. When logical form is important, we tend to make systematic errors in reasoning and decision making. So I oftentimes use two different metaphors to help students kind of get their handle on the relationship between content, logical form, and a good argument. And I say you can think of content, true premises, the way those premises are presented, as a car metaphorically, right? And logical form as passable roads, as good structural relationships. So if you want to get from Cal State or from your house to Cal State Long Beach, if you've got a good car, that's half the battle, but it's not the whole battle. You could have a Ferrari, but if an earthquake wiped out all the roads between here and Cal State Long Beach, that Ferrari isn't going to help you get to Cal State Long Beach. It needs those structural relationships to get from point A to point B. The same is true for an argument. It needs true premises. It needs good content. But it also needs the underlying structural relationships that translate the good content in the premises to the necessarily true or highly probable truth of the conclusion. So content, logical form, car, road. Another metaphor that you can use to think about arguments, and there are two components, are the metaphor of a house that has a facade that keeps the weather out, makes it livable, right? And the frame of that house, which is the structural support that keeps the facade intact. And so you need both elements to have a good house. You can have the most beautiful facade in the world, but it will collapse if it doesn't have a proper underlying frame, structural support. You can have good content for your argument, true premises, definitely, right? But without that logical form, just like the facade without the frame, you can't get to the conclusion. You can't translate those good premises into a definitely true or highly probable conclusion. And so, two elements, content, form. Human beings rely heavily on content, relatively insensitive to logical form. Perry and his co-authors are focusing primarily on deductive logic. They introduce some evaluative terms to help you keep track of arguments and their overall quality. So the first term they introduce is this notion of a valid argument. So on page 10, they tell us an argument is valid if it satisfies the following condition. If its premises were true, then its conclusion would have to be true. So notice this isn't a statement that the argument's premises are true. It's a statement about what will be the case if they're true. Whenever the argument's premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. if that relationship holds, regardless of the actual truth of the premises or falsity of the premises, if there is that underlying structural relationship such that whenever the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true, then our argument is said to be valid. It has good deductive logical form. That's only half the story, though, and so we need another evaluative term. Argument is valid if it has good logical form. Conversely, it's invalid if it fails to have good logical form. An argument is successful. It establishes its conclusion if it is sound, if it has both components of a good deductive argument. So an argument is sound if it satisfies the following two conditions. First condition, it's valid. It has good logical form, half the story. Second condition, all of its premises are true. It has good content, the other half of the story. So sound arguments have good logical form and good content. They are deductive arguments where the premises are true and the deductive inferential claim holds. We can summarize these evaluative terms for statements, for deductive arguments, and for those inductive arguments that I talked about with the following little chart. So statements are bits of our language that have truth values that can be true or false. So a statement can be true or a statement can be false. Because statements have truth values, oftentimes we don't know the actual truth value of a statement. Statements are also said to have probabilities, likelihoods that they are true or they are false, estimates of whether they're true or false. Deductive arguments are structured collections of statements. Part of the structure is the premises, the content. Part of the structure is the underlying relationship between the premises and the conclusion. Deductive arguments that have a good deductive logical form are said to be valid. They're arguments such that whenever the premises are true, the conclusion also has to be true. That's their structural relationship. A valid argument that has true premises is a successful argument. It is sound. It's got good logical form. It's guaranteed that if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. And it's got good content. The premises are true. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. So the conclusion is true. It's a sound argument. A valid argument with good logical form that doesn't have true premises, that doesn't have good content, can't establish a definitely true conclusion. You need true premises and good logical form. If you just have good logical form, then you can establish the truth of the conclusion. Your argument is said to be unsound or unsuccessful. A deductive argument that doesn't have good logical form is said to be invalid. It fails to establish that if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. And so regardless of the truth or falsity of the premises, it can't translate that truth value into a guarantee of the truth of the conclusion. It will always be unsuccessful as a deductive argument. Inductive arguments have that same two components. An inductive inferential claim is one that says if the premises are true, then the conclusion is highly probable, very likely to be true. Arguments that have that structural relationship between premise and conclusion are said to be strong inductive arguments. They have good inductive inferential logical form. If they have true premises as well, they have both components. Premises are true. If the premises are true, then the conclusion is highly probable. They establish their conclusion, and so they're said to be cogent. Good inductive logical form without good true premises won't establish our conclusion and hence is uncogent, not successful. And an argument that doesn't have that relationship, can establish whenever the premises are true, this conclusion is highly probable, is a weak inductive argument, and all weak inductive arguments will be unsuccessful, and hence they are uncogent.